Good afternoon, everyone. Can I hear you out there? Good afternoon. All right. What a day, huh? It's pretty gorgeous. I am just thrilled. I'm Dolly Duffy, the Executive Director of your Notre Dame Alumni Association, and I have the great privilege of interviewing Link Jarrett, Notre Dame's baseball coach. And I have to tell you, I just met him for the first time, and I knew that it was going to be great because everything you hear across campus from everyone as to what an incredible addition you are to this place. So thanks for saying yes to Notre Dame.
Well, Dolly, first of all, thanks for inviting me. And I guess my sense walking out here was that we are back to what Notre Dame's supposed to be, and this is what it's about, and the feeling on campus and just the vibrancy with which the crowd provides our recruits and our game day atmosphere. This is what it should be about, and I'm glad we're back to that.
Well, so I want to talk about your first two seasons at Notre Dame, but before that, tell us a little bit about your time at Florida State, your playing career. Don't be modest.
I was a part of some very good teams, and I felt like I was a piece of those teams. We had exceptional pitching. I played for the winningest coach in the history of college baseball, so he had a knack for putting us in position to win. I was fortunate to play basically all 4 years, and the 1 year we did not make it to Omaha to the College World Series, Notre Dame knocked us out. And that stuck with me, not only the way they performed, but the way that the players carried themselves. And when I had an opportunity, decades later to interview to be the coach at Notre Dame, the way those guys functioned and performed with such class was very evident to me, and it was something I hope our team embodies to this day. It stuck with me. So I was fortunate to have a chance to play on good teams at Florida State and play in the College World Series, but there was a piece of that resonated in terms of what the Fighting Irish did and what they meant, even as a player when I was 20 years old.
So after coaching stops all across the South, you got your first head coaching job, I believe, in 2012 at UNC Greensboro, and you had a ton of success with the Spartans. What was it about Notre Dame, besides the decorum of the players, that made you think this is exactly the time I should make this move?
Yeah, well, in this business, you have to try to project your readiness for the job that is what you hope is your career job. And the job at Greensboro, having been an assistant at Auburn and East Carolina and Florida State, I needed to learn how to be a head coach. And our athletic director, Kim Record, recognized the desire for some young, eager assistants to become head coaches. She gave me that chance, and we were able to turn that around. When the job at Notre Dame came open, it's funny, my son, who's actually a fifth-year senior at NC State, he told my wife, he's like, Dad's getting the job at Notre Dame. Like, that's where he belongs, and that was unique. I feel like I have a chance to coach the best student athletes in the world. These guys are phenomenal workers. They work so hard on this side of campus. By the time they get to us at 2 or 3 in the afternoon, I feel like they've already put in a hard, honest day's work academically. To see the way they work on the field is probably even beyond what I thought Notre Dame would mean to me. These guys are just phenomenal, and when the job came open here, that's what I thought about. I thought that I'm going to coach at the best university in the world, and I'm going to coach the most well-rounded, exceptional student-athletes that play the sport of college baseball, and it couldn't be more true. They are.
Well, let's give it up. We're not done yet, but give it up for those comments. So your first season in South Bend, the team got off to an incredible 11-2 start, including a road sweep of North Carolina. What was it like when you then heard that everything was canceled due to COVID?
We were on the bus going to Louisville, and we were in first place in the ACC. And obviously we won the Atlantic Coast Conference last year by 5 games, and I'm not so sure that the team that was playing in 2020 was not as good or better than the team we had last year. And when Jack called me and said, Coach, I don't know exactly where you are right now, but if you're on the bus, that bus needs to turn around and it needs to go back to the hotel. And I was sitting in this first seat on the right in the bus where I sit every trip, and I didn't think that that was really going to be the end of the season. I thought we were going to the hotel, figure out the COVID situation, and maybe you regroup in a couple weeks and you continue the season or get to the conference tournament and have that in the postseason. But as the days and hours went on, I knew that phone call had far more weight to it than I realized when I answered it. Talking to those guys in an effort to remove them from campus as quickly as we could in about a 24 to 48 hour period, I realized how serious this was. And on the baseball side, I probably didn't appreciate what we had accomplished in terms of where we took the program in 13 or 14 games. So that was a lot to process on a bus ride and then trying to get from Louisville back here and fly these guys all over the country to get them home as fast as we could get them home. So just a situation that you could never have prepared for or thought of. When the dust settled, I think the positive momentum we had with the program from getting off to such a good start probably helped us. It helped our recruiting, through April and May and June and July during COVID, and led us into what we did last year.
So your optimism is probably what led you to believe there's no way this could possibly be the end of the season. When did you know that that was it? Was it days, weeks?
I think it was weeks. I believe the Atlantic Coast Conference canceled the rest of the events, if I remember correctly, for the 2020 season. And that was it. And, for some of these kids, that ended their baseball opportunity career-wise. The draft went from what we know as a 40-round draft to 5 rounds. So there were unheard of events that occurred, and I think it was probably a month in when the ACC said, that's it. So the conversations that escalated after that announcement was difficult on us as a program and really tough on the kids, really tough.
I can't imagine. For any of you who don't know, this spring season was outstanding. The team won their division in the ACC, hosted a regional for the first time since 2004, made it to the Super Regionals for the first time since 2002, and nearly made it to the College World Series for the third time in school history. That last one probably makes you wince, but the rest of it is unbelievably impressive. After a few years of struggling with that team, not performing, you came on board and produced that fast. How do you look back on that year?
Well, I think of the players. Now, the coaches, I feel like it's our responsibility to give them structure and present the right methods to allow them to achieve individually and then collectively. I cannot get past how hard these kids work at everything. And that trait that they have probably facilitated a turnaround, because when you give them information and give them things to work on and structure, I've never seen guys work at it like they work at it. And I would ask my assistants every week, am I throwing too much at them? And their answer was, Coach, I don't think so. But until you get into the heat of battle and you're asking them to do some of the detailed things you've worked on, you really don't know if they understand what's going on. They did. The consistent play from the first trip to Wake Forest all the way through Starkville. I know we didn't beat Mississippi State. To be honest, that event should have been here. That's a whole nother discussion. We can have a whole nother meeting on that if you want to. But I've never seen a team perform from start to finish as well as this group performed. They did not lose back-to-back games the entire year. You're talking about 50-plus games, and not to lose 2 in a row, I'd never seen anything like it. Our pitching staff was built on variety. We didn't have 3 starters. We really had one who pitched on Saturday. So Friday and Sunday, we really juggled our bullpen and mixed and matched as we tried to navigate the other team's lineup and try to toss different looks at the other team. And it was just remarkable looking back at how that worked. And you see major league teams do it in the playoffs and the World Series where they don't necessarily run starters out there for 6 or 7 or 8 innings. That's what we had to do. And we had to do it the entire season. Bertrand, one of the best kids I've ever coached, not just pitchers, but kids. For him to throw on Saturday, aligned the bullpen to pitch on Friday and Sunday, and we played on Tuesday a few times, and we were able to just mix and match. And the strength of our pitching was in the variety that we had. Bunch of good lefties, several good right-handed pitchers, and the strength was in the collective group, not just individuals, excelling on their own. It was just 12 to 15 of those guys that really stepped up.
Well, and if you've watched these players, if you've talked to any of them or their families, they are just having the time of their lives under your tutelage of them. So we're glad you're here. I'm curious, what has been the biggest surprise since you arrived at Notre Dame, baseball or otherwise?
Well, everybody, they almost poke fun at me because I'm from the South. Okay, I've coached in the South. I grew up in the South. So the weather is always something that people ask me. And I feel like at times it's almost to set me up to know that I'm not going to have a good answer for that. Well, as I got into the preseason, obviously right now you could practice and play baseball. Now, January and February, it's difficult. So people always wanted to hear my response to how are you going to handle the weather in South Bend versus Auburn or Greensboro, North Carolina, or Florida. And watching the preseason roadmap take place for me, I never missed a day. Now, we had to go indoors basically the whole time until we went south and played. But the way I spun that around is it's the first time in my preseason that I've ever had each day progress exactly how I drew it up. And that buckles people. And I guess the surprise would have been if you plan right. Now, you have to have talented players. There's no getting around that. But if you plan it right, I guess I was pleasantly surprised with how well we came out of Loftus in the indoor batting cage and the indoor mounds and played from day one. So it was a pleasant surprise. Now, it was something I had never experienced because most of our workouts were outside in North Carolina. If it was a mess, we really didn't have anywhere to go. But this is the first time in my 2 preseasons that every day you lined up to do the work that you had planned that we did it. So I took that kind of people making fun of me and how are you going to ever survive and figure this out into what I thought was one of the biggest positives for our program.
I'm breathing a sigh of relief that I did not ask a single question about the weather. So before we take questions from the audience, as you mentioned, your son JT plays for NC State. What's it like coaching against him?
Weirdest thing I've been through. We were training partners. When you're in this business and he's playing, whether it's in your hometown or whether it's 2 hours away or whether it's 12 hours away, it's hard to line up to see the games. Even when he's playing in high school and I'm right there, it didn't line up that I could just go to all of his games when you're coaching. So I considered myself almost like his training partner in the off season. So we'd have fun hitting in the cage and getting outside, taking some ground balls when we could. When they rolled in here, that was the weirdest thing I'd ever been through because now your training guy is actually out there in the other uniform, like, against you. So just bizarre. And when they came here, it was probably the low point of their season. If you followed the ACC, there was a period of time where I think NC State, if they weren't in the bottom, they were really close. And when they left here, they caught fire a little bit. So we won 2 of the 3 games. They beat us on Saturday. We won Friday and Sunday. And when they left the Joyce Center and they showered and got on that bus, there were some long, sad faces, including number 15, who I kind of hugged him, and Mama's over there crying. But they went on their way, and actually, they made it to the College World Series, and it was a phenomenal run for them. So if it could have been as neutral as possible for everybody involved, we won the series. That helped us. Maybe winning a game here got them going, and they caught fire, and they ended up having a really good second half. So as awkward as it was watching him run around out there, once the game started, it was more normal than the pregame and after the game and some of the other circumstances other than the 27 outs. So it was good. Going down there this year will be equally as strange, because it just doesn't line up that two, father-son duo would match up in the same division of the same conference, but it's going to happen. So we got them here last year, and we'll have to roll in next year. That's our first ACC series is down there in mid-March.
Well, they had an incredible run to the semifinals of the World Series, and then a COVID outbreak cost them the chance to move on. What was that like for a dad to be watching?
Absolutely brutal. There's so many layers to how that evolved for them. To make a long story short, when they had vaccinated guys, some of those guys tested positive. The NCAA made a very tough decision, and I don't think there was any precedent at the time on how to handle what was going on. So they made a decision, and NC State was in a position to really get into that final series, but they had lost so many guys that were ruled out of the tournament that they lost the game, and then when they continued to have issues, they were completely removed. So from the highest of highs to the lowest of lows at an event where you feel like they were in a position to win a national championship. So the roller coaster of that week and the weeks after was something I hope nobody has to go through again, whether it's a parent or an athlete in that arena. Very difficult. I feel like those guys have finally put that as far behind them as they can. I'll get to go down there November 20th. We had our on-field ceremony last week for our championships that we won. They'll have theirs November 20th. So I think I'm going to be able to get to go to that football game. So that'll be, put that to bed. But
that's good.
It turned out to be obviously a good year, and that just ended in a very disappointing, awkward way.
Well, good luck to JT. So how about some questions from the audience? We got one right over here.
What do you do when you lose players like to the draft, like Nico Cavadas and all those guys that were really good last year?
Good question, and it's an ongoing situation for us in college baseball. You have to try to project early on who you think you're going to lose. And we felt like Nico and Tanner Kolep would probably be good drafts, and they were. Now, planning for it and absorbing it statistically on the team are two different things. We're going to have our group come together and pick up some of the slack that Cavadas was so explosive, the things he did. Our group is going to have to collectively find a way to try to account for some of that offensive production. Tanner Kolep, probably the best relief pitcher in the country, he pitched in every different role that a relief pitcher could pitch in. So having a Liam Simon, a Ryan McClinsky, who is a new grad transfer for us, a Roman Kimball, Radek Burkholz, somebody's going to have to equally fill that void in our bullpen. Cavadas offensively, Kolep on the mound. We're just going to have to find that group and allow them to emerge. Somebody's going to come out of our group and take the place of those guys. It's not going to be easy, but you hope in your recruiting and your planning that you've stacked yourself enough that you can overcome some of those losses, because if your team is good, you're going to have those losses every year to the draft, and it's going to happen again in June for us when we look ahead. Good question.
Coach, now that you've been here a couple years, when you and your other coaches are recruiting candidates to come to school here, what are some of the things that you've kind of developed over these 2 years that you tell them and their parents when you're trying to sell them Notre Dame over some maybe other schools that they're being recruited, notwithstanding the weather, and probably you're going to play your first 6 or 8 weeks down south anyways? What are some of those points?
Well, I want them to understand, number one, and I think most of the people we recruit understand academically what this involves to get in to Notre Dame, and then as you move through it, the dedication you have to have academically to pursue the degree and land that degree. It's exceptional work, but when you come out of it, that sets you up to be in good position for life. Whether the draft plays out or not, this sets you up for life, and I want them to understand that. The global reach of the Notre Dame family, I mean, there's people here that are in that world that associate with our players, that form a network combined with the degree that allows them to have contacts in the business world that can take them exactly where they thought they would go when they signed up here. You factor in athletics, you're playing ACC baseball, and the teams year in and year out that you compete with, you saw it this year. They are national championship caliber programs. All 14 of the teams that played ACC baseball this year were ranked in the top 25 at one time or another. So when you combine all of that, there's nothing like this. So in a quick snippet, that is the essence of what we sell to them in the recruiting process. It is the best of the best, and to do it, you have to be one of the best in your realm, at your position, in your academic world to function here. You have endless support in every facet of the support structure that a university could offer, athletically, spiritually, academically. Every piece of what you could ask for exists on this campus, and there's not a better place. There you go.
Sign me up. Do we have any more questions? Great.
Thanks, Coach. Little scouting report. We know who's going to win the ACC tournament this spring, but who do you see as your competition in the ACC and then in the World Series?
Good one. Well, I have to think about that one for a second. Louisville's always an interesting team. When I saw them last year, again, it's the first time really getting through the whole gamut with these teams. They're always very athletic, very good pitching. I think they're in the conversation. Florida State had the pitcher of the year and the player of the year. They return a lot of really good pitching. They lost their catcher was a first rounder in the ACC player of the year. So they lost a little firepower offensively. They do return some pitching. We return probably more than anybody. We did lose 2 All-Americans, so obviously you have a favorable feel for where we are. Georgia Tech returns a ton off of their team, and when the dust settled last year, they emerged as the winner of the other side. So we were the winners of our division. We were the overall champion, but they kind of rose to the top of the other division. So if I had to say right now, I would probably say Georgia Tech, Louisville, Florida State, and I would like for us to be in that conversation. We have so many guys back that had a taste of it, but are very, I guess, hungry and disappointed that we didn't really finish the deal in Starkville. So that hunger, that taste, but then the hunger and a little bit of frustration that you didn't finish the deal, I think is very good for us.
As a player, who did you look up to as you grew up through the years? And as a coach, what style and who would you say you follow?
Good one. I was a switch hitter, and my family was from Pennsylvania. So when I was a youngster, those Phillies were pretty good. And that switch hitter, Pete Rose, I marveled at how consistent and how tough he was. So I modeled my switch hitting after him. Like I was, and those teams, Mike Schmidt and Manny Trio and Steve Carlton, Tug McGraw, I can think back to that group. Coaching-wise, obviously my foundation from my college coach. When you're in the college business, I think you revert to your college coach, and Mike Martin was as good as anybody at coaching the game. Augie Garrido also had a style about him with his teams that I really appreciated. As I played against them, I think he was the coach at Cal State Fullerton and then moved on to Texas. And then I coached against him. And I did sense when we played Fullerton, they had so much variety, and their players were so versatile and so adept at every facet of the game. The base running, the bunting, the ability to pitch and pitch with confidence. So I go back to my college coach, but I also was perceptive enough to be aware of who was against me and how well their teams played and essentially how well they were coached. So I hope that's what you wanted. That's what stands out to me, yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking our very own Link Jarrett.